I wanted to start with a quote, and it goes like, "If you kill a cockroach, you're a hero. If you kill a butterfly, you're evil. Morals have aesthetic criteria. It's not what you do; it's who or what you do it to." Do morals have aesthetic criteria?
I absolutely think they do. Yeah. And I think when I think about that quote, I think it sort of reminds me of the hazards of ethics and philosophy in a vacuum. Um, because sometimes the way that people behave in the political world, in the real world, can distort ethics, and they can apply their own subjectivity over the top of ethics and bend it to their own will. Um, so it sort of reminds me of the hazards of discussing and thinking about ethics in a vacuum that's not connected to the real world and the way that people actually apply prejudice um, and behave in reality.
So do you think the context carries a lot of weight here, and say like, because someone is playing a role of like a politician or some other, like, I don't know, person in power, or just playing a social role in any circumstance, we then try and separate like the ethics of that social role from the ethics of them as a human, but really they are, they're a human being underneath all that, and we should see them in that way, and not create the vacuum of the persona. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in essence, and I think when philosophical discussions and discussions about ethics um, are happening, for example, I'll bring it to life a little bit, um, and this is slightly separate from the quote itself, but um, effective altruism or utilitarianism has this very famous thought experiment about, you're walking past a drowning child in a puddle, and you're wearing a very expensive suit. Do you jump in to the pond to save the drowning child and ruin your suit? And the answer is yes. But I guess in that thought experiment, and when we do that mental exercise, we can get lost in that mental exercise and forget that the person judging which kid to save is has their own prejudices. They've got their own sense of hierarchy as to which children are more important to save and which ponds you should jump in. For example, you might think that, a child in the UK for a British person is more important than a child who's dying in Gaza. And that isn't, you can't really justify that from an ethical or philosophical point of view. But if you've got some sort of inherent racism, or you've got some sort of xenophobia, which humans do, then you can make that conscious choice. And I think when we have the thought experiment and we do the ethical discussions, it's important to understand how people actually act in the real world.
Are you familiar with the trolley problem, Joel?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what comes to mind a lot for me. It's like, is one human's life who's maybe a doctor and provides all this value to society, is that more valuable than five people who are maybe not contributing collectively enough? And there's lots of different sort of dilemmas and stuff, but I think when I first started exploring morals, and the more I explore morals, the more that comes clear to me, and you kind of mentioned it a bit there, is it's a lot of subjectivity, right? And the quote that I started with about sort of aesthetics, morals have aesthetics. But that's just a part of subjectivity, and it's a part of perception.
Mhm.
So I think it's it's a lot about people's perception of what you do or what you choose, not what actually you choose. And it's always very context dependent. And I think we don't really know these answers to these moral dilemmas until we actually experience them and we actually go out and do it. And so I think everyone's a good person until life actually tests them. I think
Agreed.
we kind of we walk about life, and we all really want to be a good person, but then some kind of obstacle or chaos gets in the way and our morals are really tested. It's like, I can probably throw an example of like, the other day I was like, I needed to get to South London on the tube, but I didn't have money. My card wasn't swiping. So my morality was challenged to then go and skip the tube because I didn't have money to go to my destination. But does that alter, like, but before that, maybe I've never done that before, and I would have thought that it's a bad thing. And so I guess one thing that I would rule out quite like straight away is the sort of Kantian, like, I think Kantian had the categorical imperative, which is this very like dogmatic approach to morality, which is like that is wrong, full stop. No kind of, the categorical imperative is very, there's no context about this. It doesn't change. There's no subjectivity. This is objectively immoral. Skipping the tube is objectively immoral. But I don't know a world where that can really work, me personally. Yeah.
I just want to touch on the first segment of that you said, Jacob, and it made me think of the sort of Carl Jung / like Jordan Peterson idea that like we mistake being moral for just not damaging anyone, for just like when life is at peace, just not harming anything and staying in that peaceful status quo, to that, like, our brain kind of makes us assume that that's like pure morality, but really that's just like you're sat on cruise control. Like, you're not actually making any choices. That morality really comes through when you have to sacrifice some part of your ego or some part of your like self-indulgence to do what feels right, feels morally right. And that tube example is a small example, but that you can expand that to any like great chaos we face in our life. In the status quo, is morality even a factor? And yeah, I'm interested in this open discussion about how context change and how that kind of blurs the lines of what's right and what's wrong. And I know, like, Sam, you've got a lot of thoughts on this, so let's hear what you got to say about that.
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think I agree with where you are, both in terms of like the rejection of the Kantian dogmatism, which just doesn't really work in the real world. But I do think there is a world in which we should avoid harming people. Like, I don't think the measure of the goodness of our actions needs to be like whether or not we harm other people. Just to your point about the what you said about Jung and Jordan Peterson, I do understand that the status quo can feel quite bland at times. But even within that status quo, let's sort of unpack it a little bit, because we live in a society where certain things are just common sense, right? And the way they became common sense sometimes isn't really investigated or questioned. But there are certain things, like, for example, like you know, the train scenario that you were in, Jacob, is common sense that you tap, right? And if you don't have the money, you don't tap. But like, why is that common sense? Like, there's a layer of like in civilization where we're like, okay, cool, this is common sense. We don't question this. There's no decision to be made. But really, there's a whole layer of ethics that is drilled into us from children, that we don't question because everyone does it. It's common sense. If all the shops that you go to were to hike the price of eggs by £5, at what point does that illusion break? Like, is it when eggs become £10 or £15? At some point, the illusion has to break, and you're like, actually, no, you're stealing from me. So if I take these eggs and walk out the shop, I've done the ethical thing. It's not stealing anymore. So I do think that there's this layer of civility that we have in society that sometimes is set up to benefit people in power, and us as common folk, we just have to play along, and sort of just shut up and get on with it. But I do think there comes a point where, you know, the train is too much, right?
I agree
Incorporating
with you.
too
I
much for
think
me.
this is where we blur the lines between like what I would call higher spiritual morality, or like, to use C.S. Lewis's term, like the natural law, the law of human nature, these kind of unspoken morals that you never have to be taught, that are always there, and like social psychology and conforming to a society. Because really, is paying for a train ticket, does that come into this like deep uh moral code that we all human beings really have ultimately? No, because it's very trivial, and it's a product of our society that we live in the 21st century. And that's why it doesn't feel too deep to not tap in, because that what you feel, Jacob, there, I don't think that's actually a moral issue. I think that's purely a social psychology, like lack of conformism, and you've got this herd instinct in you to fit in with everybody else and not be the one standing out, and that's what makes you think it's wrong. That's a completely different issue to treating someone unfairly, or like, yeah, like, you know, all the fundamental moral kind of foundations that I think everyone in most countries of the world, in most cultures, would agree with.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm thinking like
Just quickly, Jacob, before we get into it, did you tap or did you bump the train?
I bumped.
Yeah, my guy, that's it. Love it. I love it.
I mean, I think with I'm thinking a lot about Nietzsche right now, and I think when you used the example of the eggs, is kind of like the people in power make the rules, and then the herd then abides, and that's when Nietzsche's kind of herd morality comes in. And I guess I'm trying to think about how do we kind of like tell how do we measure how much of a good person we are, and how do we know how much of a good person we are? And I think my immediate thoughts come about of like how much harm do we do. So when I'm bumping the train, I'm not really doing anyone any harm. I'm causing the tube company a little bit, so I don't know if it's owned by a council, the tubes. I'm causing the tubes a little bit of financial loss, which they won't see. To me, I'm not really harming anyone,
No.
and I'm kind of bringing in this sort of will to power by myself. I'm taking control. I'm doing it, and that's why I also think when I used to shoplift as well. When I'm like shoplifting in Morrison's, I'm like thinking like I'm taking a bit from Morrison's that they won't see. Mr. Morrison's doesn't care enough, and he's not going to see it. So I'm not causing that much harm, and because of my current situation, I think it's a little bit immoral, but it's like tiny percentage. So that's how I would. Yeah. Do you think this idea of what's your thoughts on this idea of how do we measure how much of a good person we are?
So I like your harm principle, especially as like sort of a a base, because, you know, there's a way to move through life without harming people, and really that's what a lot of ethics is about, right? A lot of philosophy, a lot of ethics is, how do we move through this world without causing damage, right? And a lot of ethical rules are about, you know, don't do X because that has this impact on someone else or the group or whatever it might be. I think the downfall of the harm principle is the subjectivity around harm, right? Because if you use yourself as the locus of, I guess, measurement, right? Is you yourself and your subjective view of what is harming other people. But, you know, someone might make their own subjective view that when they saw you bump the train, it caused them so much emotional damage that it did actually harm them. And I think to try to alleviate that subjectivity, I would sort of widen the net a little bit and take the view of your community and what the community determines is harmful to the community. And I think you can layer that on top of your own individual subjectivity, which we all live in. Subjectivity is not something to like try to eradicate. But I think I take a more communal approach. So if my community, the people that I love and care about, are telling me that this is a harmful thing, either to them or to other people, I have to I have to sort of bake that into my judgment, and that it reduces the risk that I get it wrong myself through my own subjectivity.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you pushed back a little bit there, because I was thinking of similar lines. In that example you used, Jacob, right? To you, in your like own sphere of experience and context, the shoplifting was okay because Mr. Morrison won't care, right? But imagine if I don't know, a younger kid than your 14-year-old self, then a 10-year-old sees you do that, and then they think that that's an okay thing to do in their context. They could just grab anything from the shelf and take it. It's like we don't realize how much we are signals for other people of what's okay. It kind of comes back to that social psychology point of all of us. We're all signaling to each other what the rules are. And if it might feel okay to your context, but you're still signaling something that could be misinterpreted by somebody else in a different context. And that's the risk. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. This is a good point to push back on, yeah. And I think for my 14-year-old shoplifter self, I didn't have too much influence, because with great powers comes great responsibility, and you kind of have that influence on more people, and then that's how you kind of make a small change in the world, is when one decision impacts a lot of people. And luckily, uh, I don't have that, and so people, it doesn't have that kind of big social impact. But I think it's something that is a very good thing to consider, as how is this action then affecting. It's like this kind of big cause and effect. It's like, yeah, that someone could see me, who's like a bit younger, and then think that's an okay thing to do, and then they get in prison a couple years later, and it's like, I didn't consider that, and it's like, damn. And so I kind of think of
Also,
it like,
what world would we live in if everybody did that? Would we live in an immoral society if everyone just didn't agree with the arbitrary rules? Well, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, but that's a little bit of slippery slope. Like, like if everyone did it, sure. I think Kant actually uses that argument when arguing for the imperative, the categorical imperative. He does use a bit of a slippery slope argument, like that you should act in a way that you would want everyone else to act. And, you know, stuff like stealing, like if everyone stole. But, I don't think it needs to be that extreme. It also does depend on whether you take an idealist or a materialist view of the world.
Well, this is a good point for me to jump in, right? Because one of my questions for you is, I saw a clip from your work that one of your favorite ways, or maybe your favorite way to perceive and interact with reality, was Kant's Transcendental Idealism. So could you unpick that a little bit for me and Jacob and the people listening?
Yeah. So what Kant said is that, and this is like quite metaphysical, right? It's about the nature of reality. And what he said is that the world that we see is something he called phenomena, right? And the phenomena is not the actual objects and things within themselves, which he called noumena. And because our experiences are filtered through time and space and our senses, what we actually understand of the world is the phenomena, but not the noumena. And that is the core idea in his Transcendental Idealism. And I think it's a very powerful way to understand metaphysics. And it's also something that's been kind of confirmed in neuroscience, right? Since Kant. And I think is a very powerful framework, and really it just resonates with me that everyone has their own subjective experience of the world that is tempered by time, space, and their senses, and it can sort of explain human subjectivity a little bit.
So just to flesh this out a second, do you mean like we see the world based on like our perceptual mold over it? Like when I look at my laptop, I don't see what it actually is, which is this sort of complex electrical system that I would have no idea how to create or even fix if it went wrong. What I see is access to my work and my writing and the podcast and a world of information via like the internet and all this kind of stuff, I see the function. I see what it serves for me in my life. I don't actually see the thing. Same way when I look at a coffee cup, or I look at my water bottle, or I look at I don't know, my toothbrush in the bathroom. I see how it serves my goals and how it serves my worldview, rather than the actual thing in and of itself. Is that the same lines?
You're on the right lines, but I think Kant would take it a level deeper than that. So we're talking about like on the genuine metaphysical level, the laptop, the thing, the construction of atoms that you call your laptop, is, you're seeing the phenomena of a laptop. You're not actually seeing the thing in and of itself. We have no idea what the thing
Right.
actually objectively is.
So I'm seeing my idea of what that I call a laptop. Because actually, you're right. When does this, we had a conversation with an architect yesterday, and he made this like structure that he called silent car, which was like 4 doors and 5 chairs in a parking space. And it was kind of to make us question, when does a car become a car? And I think that in the same context here with this laptop, when does this construction of atoms become a laptop? Because if it's just the screen, it's not. If it's just the keys, it's not. If they don't work together, it's not. It's actually on a very fine like precipice, what I actually consider to be a laptop. But I do imprint that idea on this physical thing, but it's not the physical thing. Okay, I'm with you. Carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. And an easy way, like the way I try to think about it, is just comparing two people. And this is obviously a simplification of Kant. But if two people who have different physical bodies, right, that interpret the world in different ways, look at the same thing. For me and you look at your laptop, except I'm, say, colorblind, or the particular way that my eyes are tuned, it absorbs the light rays that come off that object into my brain in a slightly different way to yours. I would see a different phenomena to you. The laptop would be slightly more gray for me, or slightly more green. And, yours is a slightly different color. We're both looking at the laptop, but both of us have an experience of phenomena of the laptop. And Kant would say neither of us actually see what the thing actually is. Because the actual fact of us having to see it, we have no idea what that thing is. It's just that we have an approximation of this object in front of us. And then society tells us is the laptop, actually. Is a category that we apply to this arrangement of atoms. But we have no idea what this thing genuinely actually is outside of the context of our senses.
So it's like neither of us are right, whether this is a laptop or not.
Certainly not objectively right. No.
Wow.
So does sorry, just because I'm interested in, is this transcendental idealism used in the context of morality then, in the same way that neither of us see this laptop the same, or are right in calling it a laptop, we also don't see moral circumstances or reality itself in the same way or in an accurate way. We're all just experiencing multiple phenomena at the same time that are individual to us, and that's where the subjectivity about morality can come from, because we're not looking at the same thing in a sense.
Yeah. So my understanding of Kant, and I might be wrong here, but my understanding of Kant is that his ethics, so his categorical imperative, and the transcendental idealism kind of sit in two different worlds, right? Because on one level, he's talking about what is the nature of reality and what is reality in our own human minds. And then I guess in his ethics, he's talking about how we should live our lives and how we should behave in the world. The two, I guess, are connected for us, but I don't think Kant would make an explicit connection between the two. But you're right though. Like if we're seeing different things, and it's kind of been exacerbated by social media, right? You can have an event happen in the world and different people, they're seeing different things and it's portrayed to them in different ways in different media. But two people can look at the same event or look at the same person or look at the same object and just feel different things and have a completely different reality. So you're right. I think if you take that view, it becomes quite complicated to have like you do need to just bake in people's subjectivity when they're making ethical decisions.
Yeah. This reminds me of, because I'm thinking, where does this subjectivity come from? And it, if we assume that what it, if we assume that a pen is what our consciousness tells us is a pen,
Mm.
then why does our consciousness tell us that in that way? And I think it comes back to this kind of symbolic psychology, where the common thing, there's a couple common examples of this, but if you've ever seen those pictures that are kind of like illusions, where, like, say there's the most common ones of this picture online that's quite popular that's a dress, and some people see it as a blue dress and some people see it as a black dress.
Yeah.
And what and why people see it in that way, or at least see it and why people see it as a blue dress first, is because they have different, I think it's like a different personality, or it's like they have some personality traits that are different to people that see it as a black dress. And there's another example of a common illusion of, some people see a rabbit and some people see a duck, and the people that see a rabbit have this kind of personality or this kind of brain chemistry or these kind of habits or these values. I can't remember exactly what it is, but then people that see the duck see other things. So I'm thinking the way that we see our world is largely, it could be largely stuff that we can't control if it's quite if it's up to our psychology. And maybe we'd be born with that as well. So I maybe don't have any. Do I have control of how I see what a pen is? And it's like, I don't know, it's kind of a nature versus nurture argument.
Yeah,
I see
I
it.
guess sorry, go ahead, Joel.
I was just going to say that I see on that control over perception thing that a lot of it is hardwired, like goal-oriented behavior. I'm a big belief that like perception is fueled by intention in a lot of ways. So the reason that you see the pen, Jacob, is because it serves some function to you in the world. The amount that you could perceive or see in any situation is so much that it would blow your head off. So the mind has to have a way to funnel that experience into a world that you can manipulate, because otherwise you would just get lost in the information. So the reason you see the pen and you don't see, the small fragment of like dust on your desk is because that's kind of irrelevant to you. I think we see in relevance, or maybe a better way to think about it is we see in value. In the value that pen provides you to behave in a certain way. It allows you to write or to draw, and you can expand that out to anything. The reason that we pay so much attention to things is because they are salient in value to us, or they provide meaning to us, and that can be as trivial as a mundane example like a pen, or it could be the ideas you pay most attention to and how that affects what you see in the world. And all I think it's driven a lot by value and intention and goals. But Sam, go on. What would you want to say?
I think I've forgotten what I was going to say.
That's all right. Do you agree with me though on the goal perception thing? Because that was literally one of the biggest like mind-blowing psychology moments early on for me when I first started being interested in this stuff like 4 or 5 years ago, was that like you see what you value most.
Yeah.
And somehow you have to, I mean, it's a very Peterson idea that you do have a value hierarchy somewhere in you. You may just not be aware of it, and that's what decides what you see in relation to your goal. And that's how two people look at their lives or look at a scenery in a different way, is because they're looking for different things.
I actually think that makes a lot of sense. I think our brains are extremely powerful, and this idea that they would construct a reality and a view of the world in a way that benefits us and allows for us to, see, pick up, and utilize the things that we want to, it makes a lot of sense to me. It does also remind me, though, that in our society that the three of us live in, it is a Western society that at this point is also based on consumption. And in a way, that is a utilitarian worldview, in that I see the things and I see the people and I see the phenomena that I can most consume, right? Because if I pick up the pen, I'm in a sense consuming that pen to write down stuff, right? Once that pen can no longer serve my purpose of writing, I will throw away that pen. And I do think that kind of bleeds into all aspects of Western living. We use objects till we can't use them anymore, and then we throw them away. We, on some level, engage with people in a way to consume them, right? We utilize them for our own ends. And once they can no longer serve our purpose, that, our relationship with them ends, right? So I do think is a sort of uniquely Western way of seeing the world. I think if I went to a temple, if I went to a monastery and spoke to some monks in the East, they wouldn't see the world that way. They wouldn't think about their worldview would be completely different, right? They would see everything as connected to everything else, and nothing as. And obviously, maybe I'm romanticizing their worldview a little bit, but they would see things separate from their utility to them as individuals, and more as whole things that are connected to a wider whole. But it's certainly an interesting and powerful view, and I think it certainly rings true in the West.
I guess, like, do you guys think that, like, with reality and the kind of worlds that all of us live in, because I'm kind of thinking that if our perception is so linked to reality, does that mean that we all kind of living in different worlds? Because I agree, me and a monk both live in completely different worlds, but our sense of what is a pen must be the same. Me and a monk both know what a pen is. So I wonder if there's a way that we can make this distinction a bit more, because I still think me and the monk live in quite similar worlds. I guess I'd add as well, like, you guys are, like, is there an element that's kind of like we're just born with it, how our perception is? And because I agree that our values and what our idea of what's important and the purpose that this pen is giving us will make us use this or not. But I think there's also a part of it that we're born with it. And the part of it, like, for example, my neighbor's like a really big hoarder. And so when I go around, there's like massive, like, just stacks of stuff. And it's almost like he doesn't see it. He doesn't see all the stuff he's hoarding. It's like a proper outward manifestation of his inner turmoil. And he's just completely like set in his ways of how he thinks about stuff. And I think he's kind of born like that, with how he doesn't, like, he doesn't think to make his space more clear. It's just how he is. And for me, it's different.
I think so let's take you and the monk, right? And let's expand it out from the pen to things that really mold your worldview, and go, like, how does your view on life after death compare to that monk? Or how does your view on the nature of God, the nature of the universe, those are the things that will massively move the needle? Because the reason that person, became a monk and devoted their life to the spiritual path is because they think that is the highest thing to value, is devotion to the oneness, to true consciousness, to the God in their religion or whatever. And their view that this life is not the end, that this life is just a path on that spiritual road. And so everything they do, Jacob, is grounded in that context. So yes, it would, the monk would feel the same way to you about a glass of water or a pen or whatever, the very mundane things. But when it comes to the wider context of their life, that would be different. And I'm not saying that day to day we see everything through that wider context. Sometimes we're on like, autopilot, and we're just going through the motions. We all have to eat, we all have to sleep, we all have to go to the toilet, all those kind of things. But when it comes to the higher human parts of ourselves, the motivation behind the things we do. You know, you and the monk would have very different ideas on parenthood, or what a career should be, or how you should look after animals and what purpose they have in our life, or how you perceive as the meaning of a certain religious text, or, you know, those kind of things. You'd be worlds apart. Do you agree?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think so, Joe. Yeah, I mean, a monk's a good example, I suppose. Like, I guess it's the same part of us that's the human, that we both have desires, and we both, well, actually monks killed all his desires, but we're both still human.
Right.
And his sense of what's important and how he lives is just completely different to me. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I do think though, Jacob, what you said initially does have, you know, I think you're both right in that there is some element of, on a metaphysical way, on the metaphysical level, there is some way that you and the monk are similar, in that your eyes and your ears operate in a similar way, and if you both picked up a pen, you might see very similar shapes and very similar phenomena, and that might create some shared understanding about the physical nature of this thing you're both calling a pen. But Joe, I think you're absolutely right that the way the monk sees the world is completely different, and that bleeds into every interaction with objects, nature, and humans, in a way that would be very different to someone in the West. But you could also draw that back down to the pen, right? If you look at that pen, me and you see a pen as an object to write things down on a piece of paper, but someone of a different view, I'm not going to speak for a monk here, but someone of a different view might look at that pen and be like, that is an object that is inherently connected to me and is connected to the universe, because someone had to craft that pen and mold it out of raw materials in some other part of the world, and someone else then shipped it to me, and someone then sold it to me, and through all those processes of manufacturing, transportation, and creation, the essence of those human beings is actually embodied in this thing that they created with their bare hands, or the machines that created the object. And that's a fundamentally different way of viewing that pen. It's the same object, but me and this person see it in completely different ways. I can't say that when I've got a bit of blue tack on my desk, when I pick up that piece of blue tack, I think about its creation, and I think about the essence of all the people that use their labor and their human creativity to create the blue tack. I can't say I do that when I move through the world. I do that with a lot of things, but on autopilot, I don't think about these things. Whereas someone else might.
Yeah, I think all of this is right, and I think there are constant. Me and Jacob have sort of talked about this in a previous episode. This idea of there are levels to experience. There are levels that you can experience a thing, and I think it came from Jacob asking me once, like, you know, if you receive a parking ticket in the mail or something, or a speeding ticket in the mail, and you don't open it, like, how much is that, the existence of that fine, like, how much is that salient to you at each point? Does it change, or is it the same, and all that kind of stuff? And the problem is like all levels are true. The pen, the real backstory to the pen, and the human craftsmanship, and the story of how it got there, all of that is real. But the main function, I guess, of the human brain is filtering experience so that we have an ability to just to function. We have to really water the world down so that it's usable. And I think who's some philosopher, I can't remember his name right now, maybe I'll Google it in a second. He said this line that I really love, where he was like, the map is not the territory. The territory of experience and what everything actually is way too complex for us to live. That's what I think, like, disorders like schizophrenia are, is people's maps just become so expanded that they take in so much experience that it just their sense of reality to us is so different that they struggle to function. That to me, what it is an expanded map. But the territory of what's really going on, we couldn't deal with truths that heavy and that complex. We have to create a map. And when, Jacob's map and the monk's map are different, but they're still representing the same territory. That's why there are big similarities in the way they look at the world, but still that map that they operate within would be different. I think that's a nice way to sort of put it all together.
Yeah.
I like that. I do think though, when I hear that, I'm like, I want the expanded map. I'm not. I don't run from the expanded map. Like, I'm like, fuck, man, I'm curious about that stuff.
Yes.
Obviously, I can't see. And maybe it explodes my brain, but maybe it also gives me enlightenment. Maybe that's what enlightenment is.
Yes. No, I agree with you. I mean, actually, I've just Googled there. It's Korzybski that said the map is not the territory. It's given as due. Yes, I think that's part of the, like, you hear on the line about this, like the curse of being a deep thinker and all that kind of stuff. And I think what that really means is you're somebody that wants to expand your map. I think if it hit you all at once, you go crazy. You kind of need to stretch it out very, very gradually. And then maybe you look back on yourself 5 years ago and you go, God, my map was so much less expanded than it is now. But I think getting it all at once, God, that would, that shatters you. Your mind is fragile. Like reality, your sense of reality is so fragile. You think about things like psychedelic drugs, right? All that really does is change the levels of a couple of neurochemicals, and suddenly you think you're in a different world. That's how fragile reality is. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I think what we're talking about is we're talking about expanding our awareness, and I think the price of expanding our awareness is that most people aren't at that same level of awareness. I think the more higher your awareness is, the less people are like that. But the reward of having a lot of awareness is clarity. But do you want the cost of? I think it's also actually it's not that we know so much; is that no one kind of believes us, or that no one would
understand.
No one would understand. Yeah, and yeah, and I guess your point about psychedelics is very true, because that's literally what you're signing up for. When you take some magic mushrooms, you're like, okay, I want my awareness to be expanded by 2x, 5x, and then you take it, and then afterwards, you're not the same person. And yeah, because I'm thinking about how do we control what we see and what we don't see. Maybe I want more appreciation for my living space. Maybe I wake up every day and I just see the amount of jobs that need to be done and I don't really like it. It puts me in a bad mood when I start the day. Is maybe if I did take those magic mushrooms, then I would be more aware to then move through my house and appreciate it a bit more and not be in that instant bad mood. I'm wondering if that increase in awareness maybe makes us see more and therefore maybe be able to prioritize stuff a little bit more. I guess, yeah, is the increase in awareness, does that mean that we can control what we see more and, I guess, allow our perception to be a lot better, allow how we see our world to be better?
Yeah, I think it certainly can. It certainly can. I think something like an ayahuasca trip does seem to do that for people. But also just sort of being present in the present moment also seems to do that for me. I feel like I've not done ayahuasca, and I'm not ruling out doing ayahuasca in the future, to be fair. But I do think that this idea of gratitude of like where you are and the things around you, and being able to context change, right? Take yourself out of the anxiety of the future. That's really what what you described there. Is to bring yourself back into the present, and I think that's doable without, I don't know. I think it's doable without drugs, but for some people it isn't, and I can't really speak to that. But I think expanding your map, especially the way you described it, Joel, gradually, I think is extremely important. It's extremely important. And whether you use substances or not to do that, I think it is definitely a worthwhile thing, which is kind of what you're pointing at, Jacob, right? Like, is it worth expanding our map? Does it improve our lives? And I think overall it does.
Well, there's this. I'm a big Carl Jung fan, and he had this idea called true consciousness that I think about a lot, which is kind of putting all this together. I think it puts Jacob's awareness together, and I think it puts your great points on the present moment together. And Jung described this state of being where you experience the world with so much more depth. You know, you listen to music and you feel the emotional weight of each chord and each progression in the melody, or you look out and you see the beautiful intricacy of a tree, of a leaf, a piece of architecture, or where you speak to somebody and you listen with deep intention and you hear the history in what they've said and the depth of wisdom and all they've been through to say that to you, or you really see the look in their eyes, you see the spirit, you see the soul through the way that they're looking at you. And he said, this way of being is extremely difficult to cultivate, but he said it is the ultimate quest of a human being. And it's when you do your primary job of being the universe experiencing itself as deeply as possible. And I think that is found in the present moment. And I think that is found through expanding your map as much as possible. But the price that you pay for true consciousness is that you feel everything to such a deeper level, the good and the bad. And it's so, and you have to kind of find a way to separate your ego's evaluations of that good and bad and just see it as experiencing the universe and doing your role as a human, as a spirit. And it means you'll have high highs and great ecstasies and a great connection to others and to nature, but you'll also feel the pain of the world a lot more deeply. And that's kind of the risk of that high awareness that you were talking about, Jacob. But I think you have to be willing to open yourself up to it, you know, exploration and play, but also pain and great suffering. But that's ultimately what we're here for. And I love the way that Jung writes about that. I think that does justice to what both of you have said.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think you told me, Joe, about when Carl Jung tried to describe what true consciousness actually is. What moment did he most feel it? And he kind of describes this moment when he's in sort of an African country and he's in
Yeah.
the savannah and he's around these animals and he's just like purely present, just kind of watching these animals and stuff. I will push back a little bit
So,
because I feel like what we're talking about a lot here, right, is peace. And I feel like peace isn't really part of the human condition. I feel like life has this warlike thing, this survival of the fittest thing about it. And I feel like when there are periods of peace, it only takes a certain amount of time till things go wrong. And I think under peaceful conditions, the man kind of harms himself. I guess I look back at kind of history and I think, I don't know if there is this kind of constant way to, because we're kind of trying to ask here about how do we make our perception great so that we move through the world in the best way. And I feel like with the awareness example, there's great burdens to awareness, and that's not that, and that's like, you know, you can have a bad psychedelic trip and then you're fucked for like, I don't know, your whole year could be fucked up. And with the peace example, yeah, I don't know if it's practically doable, even like in our evolution, because we, I don't know, we seem to kind of weave in and out of peace. Yeah,
Yeah, I at risk of like changing the conversation slightly into like human evolution, I guess I do disagree that I disagree with the popular notion of like how us as humans came to be the way we are as of 2026. I don't think that human history is a history of dog eat dog human evolution where the fittest survived at every the physical fittest survived at every moment, and that iteration of humanity destroyed every other variant of humanity. I just don't really buy that narrative story. I guess I see human progress as something that is driven by cooperation primarily, and not by war or chaos, but really by cooperation. It's the thing that kind of has driven modern human history. And Kropotkin writes about this. I mean, largely his work, maybe not largely, maybe I'm simplifying it there, but his work is a rebuttal of the popular notion of like Hobbesian philosophy, which is it's dog eat dog, it's survival of the fittest, man is brutish, selfish, and without government to curb his excesses, it would be absolute chaos. It would be it would literally just be a zombie land out there of people killing each other. And I agree with Kropotkin that not only is cooperation something that is inherent in us as humans, is actually the thing that makes us evolve. It's the thing that makes us survive. And is it evolutionary advantage to be cooperative? So I guess I reject the notion of aggressive evolution. So I would push back on that element.
I agree, and I think I might be able to help put this together a bit. That I think the reason that like we reflect upon like war and chaos and injustice to human rights and breaching of human rights and things is because they're the parts of history that we do not wish to repeat the most. They are the points where the peace and cooperation, which is and should be the baseline, get most destroyed. And I think that's the nature of memory, I guess. Even if we look at each individual person's brain, the nature of memory is so you do not repeat the things that go badly, and you do repeat the things that go well. And I think that's why this like narrative of war and aggression comes up so much, is because I guess they're emotionally salient experiences that we do not want to repeat. We can be very quickly convinced to think that that's why humans got to where we were, because we're the ones that won all those situations, and do you get what I mean? It's like, but really what they are is they're just when we got it wrong most saliently, and the baseline of what actually got us where we need to go, like you said, was that cooperation. And just to go back to that first point, Jacob, when you made up peace not being functional, I don't think I agree, because of the same kind of point. The societies that did the best through peace are the ones that you don't necessarily hear about in the history books, but we just hear about the negative blips in that when we go away from our good nature ultimately. And my last point, Jacob, which I think is an interesting discussion as well, is I don't think true consciousness and peace are the same thing, because I think you can be deeply present in a very unpeaceful situation, and in that you can alchemize it to gain wisdom or to try and make the best move. I mean, I think about someone like Marcus Aurelius, right? His life wasn't peaceful, but he had from what we know of his writings anyway, and the way that it's been interpreted, he had a very deep, like conscious, intentional way of living and approaching his life. But he was commanding, the Roman Empire through wars and things like this, and dealing with like a lot of stress and chaos. And even in my own life as an athlete, like when I tried to, like my anchor through difficult moments of pressure was always presence, like trying to be as present as possible and see things with the best perspective I could. But they still weren't peaceful experiences. I was still shit scared. But like it was my consciousness that allowed me to alchemize that stress to something more useful and more meaningful. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just thinking, can you be both like stoic and at peace? Because
Mm.
I'm thinking like I'm not sure. Like if Marcus Aurelius's life wasn't peaceful, is the cost of living a Stoic life, that you'll have a lot less peace? And if so, is it? I think it's it comes back to Kierkegaard's. Is it? Is this right? No, well, I'm thinking of something different. Um, yeah, yeah.
How do you see the difference between Stoicism and peace? And Sam, feel free to jump in here as well, because I know you've got some interest in Stoicism and that world. Because to me, part of it is being able to find peace amongst chaos through building that sort of inner citadel and coming back to those first principles.
Go ahead, Jacob.
Can you find peace in chaos? I feel like the definition of chaos is that you don't really have peace, though.
The absence of peace. What do you think, Sam?
I think Stoicism certainly misses something for me. Not necessarily because Stoicism is trying to generate internal peace and internal harmony, but more because the Stoic point of view is an extremely egoistic point of view from my perspective. Because in a sense, you're centering your reality and controlling and molding your own reality outside of the context of the world, right? It's the world that provides the chaos, and you are trying to separate yourself to create internal peace. And I think that can be an isolating worldview that removes you out of community and out of connection with others. Because in a sense, other people and other people's desires and wants and their perspectives is just another source of chaos, right? You can't necessarily have a peaceful Stoic life. And I am simplifying Stoicism a little bit here. You can't have a completely peaceful life that you control when you've got all these complex relationships with other people, other systems, and other groups. And I think trying to chase peace via Stoicism sort of isolates you from those other people.
That's an interesting point I've really heard before. The disconnection that a Stoic life can point you towards. And it's interesting that it is.
Let's think about Marcus Aurelius. Like, he lived an extremely lonely life. He was surrounded by people, but he lived a lonely life. Let's be honest.
And how a lot of the promotion of Stoicism in today's world is in this sort of personal development world that you can view it as it's an industry fueled by people's loneliness and disconnection from others. You know, and it's just it's a cope. Stoicism can be a cope to that. I think there's great value in it, of course, but I do. Yeah, that's an interesting point. What were you going to say, Jake?
Do you think we live stoically to then get the peace afterwards? Is Stoicism maybe necessary for a season, for us to then for a season to be like, it's not what happens to us, it's about how we respond to it. So let's focus on how we can respond to it by removing all the kind of distractions and just like constantly focusing on making ourselves sort of better men and stronger. And maybe because that's the way that I'm kind of leaning towards this in this discussion. I think it's for me it's necessary for a season of life, and then I think from that you can bring yourself peace.
Yeah, I think it's quite useful as a tool for a season, like you say. I think it certainly is useful. I would take a different approach, but like I think people can use Stoicism as a tool for sure. It's quite difficult though if I think about myself when I was a lot younger and potentially in a vulnerable moment, right? Just like growing up as a young man, and finding my place, and going through university or in early relationships. If I used Stoicism as a tool in those moments of vulnerability, it would be quite difficult for me to be like, oh, okay, cool, I'm done with Stoicism now. Like, it's time to move on with life. Because you're adopting a worldview in your vulnerable state, it can quite easily become the way you move in the world, and you can, in a sense, deify this worldview. Not because like you're an unintelligent person, but because you've adopted Stoicism by definition in a vulnerable moment, right? So I can see it going way too far, and that disconnection becoming almost like a pathology for vulnerable people, which is probably what we see, to your point, Joel, in this world today, especially for young men. This glorification of Marcus Aurelius and like this understanding of the world as being one that's constantly in conflict and war. And it's a bit like, chill, bro. You're not an emperor on the battlefield against like, relax, you know, chill.
You're just a bit sad.
Yeah, just relax. Like if you read Marcus Aurelius's diary, he's talking about he's waking up in the morning and he's beset on all sides. All of his generals want to overthrow him. All of his soldiers are like, need to be controlled at all moments. He's got political rivals at home. He's got rivals on the battlefield trying to take his head off. He's got assassins in his camp. Like, he can trust no one. Is a world that I don't think is really relevant to modern day 2025 Western society. And I think it's just a little bit like it's a little bit too far for me.
Yeah, I think it's a good general point. Is it's worth people taking time to realize whether the kind of beliefs and philosophies that resonate with them were just acting as emotional bandages for a time in their life. And I think we do that. We have this proclivity to just hold on to whether, you know, it's a political belief or a worldview about how one should act or how others should act, and because it served a purpose at a time when we were vulnerable emotionally, we hold on to it as tight as we possibly can because it's so connected to our identity. But sometimes we have to recognize that it either doesn't serve us anymore, or that emotional wound is healed, and you know, there's no need to hold on to it so tightly. And actually, it's better to just connect to others and return back to an open mind and think again and you know, reevaluate what resonates with you. And I think that's a big part of growing up. I mean, I look at now, like my and I think Jacob would resonate, and I think you would too, Sam, based on what I know about you. But like the amount of like worldviews that we adopt and then carve off from like 16 to 21, where I am now as a young man, is crazy. And that's why, you know, me and Jacob laugh about how, you know, one day we'll look back on early episodes of this podcast and just, you know, laugh at how silly we were because of what we didn't know and what we were holding on to. We are somewhat coming to the end of our time today, and one of the questions I did have for you, although I do like the fact that we went very off of me and Jacob's plan for this episode, it shows that we're flowing well. It was there's a clip you had that you were reflecting with a guest on, like, when you look back on your life, what stands out more? What memories are most salient? Moments of peace and of comfort, or moments of chaos? And I think it's very relevant to what we've just been discussing there. And I think it's maybe a good last point for us all to think about. Out of those two, what things stand out most? And you said it was chaos. And I'm interested in why that was the case and what that means for you. And then maybe we can open it up.
I think it is chaos, only just, to be fair, but it is chaos. And the reason I said chaos is that I feel like in navigating tumultuous times, you do genuinely find connection with people. It's the moments that you really, like, I in my own life have reached out to others. I've experienced conflict and tumultuous times with other people. And in a weird way, these moments and experiences bring me together with the people that at this point I would say I love the most and I value the most in my community. So in a sense, it was a kind of a contradictory moment for me, because my instinct is that chaos is not all that constructive, and it's not something that really breeds personal development. That was what my instinct was telling me. But I think in my own life, chaos has always brought me together with people, and in a sense, that's a luxury of having a good village and good relationships, is that you can withstand chaos. But I think other people who might not have that strength of community and relationship, chaos can be destructive. Um, and I think for our guest who we asked that question, those moments of chaos were destructive in her own life. So for me, that's why I picked chaos. But I also think that in peace, to your point earlier, Joel, about how you can synthesize and use that moment of peace to really get to understand yourself and connect with your environment. I think both of those two things can be constructive.
What do you think, Jake, when you reflect? Comfort, peace, or chaos? What stands out most?
Chaos definitely stands out the most, but it doesn't mean that it's like the best thing. Um, when you were saying about how, as young men, our worldview's changing all the time drastically, and I think that's because our body tells us that there's something about our reality that we don't like, that needs to change, and that's and the way that things, I think, do change for us is that we go through chaos and then comes the order, and our reality maybe gets better. And so I think that's why it stands out, because you kind of look back and you see that kind of transformation of yourself when you go through that chaos, and then you go up another layer and you're like, okay, I've done this before. I know how to handle this, and I can now deal with more chaos as a result of that. But I don't know if it's a good thing. Chaos is for my life. It's just like it definitely hasn't been emotionally good on me. It definitely hasn't made me into a happier person. But like, am I a bit proud of it? Maybe. Um, because I think the Nietzsche quote, like, we have to go through chaos to give birth to a dancing star, and maybe it is necessary for being a young man and growing up as a young man, but it's definitely really tough emotionally.
I like what you said, though, about the role of relationships in our ability to endure and sort of alchemize chaos. And that's definitely, relationships with friends, family, loved ones, and also I think your relationship to yourself. I think if you've got strong foundations in terms of how you connect to yourself and others, then a chaotic moment can be what you need to move your life forward. And I think it's an interesting paradox, right? Because if you told me, Joel, you can flesh out the next year of your life, what would you like it to be? Comfort and peace or chaos? I'd be stupid to choose chaos. However, when I reflect, what moments and eras of my life am I most proud of, or that made me into the person I am today? And like you said, Sam, connected me most with my loved ones. It's moments of chaos. And so it's like, it's not things we would choose, but it's things that in hindsight we knew we needed. And I think that's why the question is so interesting and why it caught my eye when I was looking at your work, because it shows us that what you want for your future and what you're proud of in your past are different.
Yeah.
And that shows that, it shows an interesting bias and part of being human.
If chaos doesn't necessarily connect me to my to people, or doesn't necessarily do that, like, what should you then do?
Well, I think there's chaos that elicits growth, and there's chaos for chaos's sake. Like we're not talking about extremes like being in a war torn country or going through serious trauma that's just deep harm and things like that. I'm talking just about the storms that everyone listening to this, no matter what their life circumstance is, you'll face at some point. Whether that's, I look at my examples in my life, and mine is when I had the major surgery on my legs when I was like 12, or when I think about the mental health like battles I've had over the years, and especially through lockdown or with situation in my family and stuff, just life stuff. I think we always come to these conversations from a privileged position. Like, I don't know what it's like to be in a country that's in war or in famine or anything like that. I'm talking about the storms that we carry through life. And I think if it's just a storm that life throws at you that everyone deals with, it's chaos you can alchemize. And I think for the people listening, that's what they're most likely going to face, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a very important point there about our privilege. Is that we've got tools, even if it's just material tools to deal with chaos. And again, the type of chaos that's thrown at us is different to someone in a war-torn region who, you know, a bomb being dropped on your house is completely different to like us stressing over a deadline. It's just they're not the same. And we can only really talk from our point of view, but yeah, there's also privilege, Jacob, to your point around relationships, right? On some level, we are given a hand in life. We're given an immediate family. We're given a certain brain chemistry that might jive or might not jive with our environment. So I think I find myself, like, when I look at my life, I think I'm extremely lucky. And my family environment that I was brought up in was a loving one. But I understand that that is just luck. It's nothing I did. And I need to be wary of, like, talking on a macro level when other people don't necessarily have that. But it is tricky, Jacob, to answer your question. What do you do when you don't have the relationships that can withstand chaos? And personally, I don't have the answer, but you can see why something like Stoicism would be an answer for people for a season, to ride the wave, and then you can go back to those relationships and try to mend them with a bit more calm, once time has passed. I'm not advocating for that, but I can see why Stoicism might be used as a tool.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of an example of, like, say I was going through a breakup and then I wouldn't have any relationship to help me through that. Then I would go, like, super stoic and just be like, just push really hard at the gym and just turn into a monster.
Yeah,
isn't that what most young guys do in that situation?
Yeah, you've got loads of other relationships that can nourish you. With friends, even like us as men, right? We the way we relate to each other is different to the way people identify as women relate to each other. And I think as men, we need to learn from women and look at the way they maintain, nourish, and grow their relationships as friends, and try to learn something from that. Because this male, loneliness epidemic narrative, a lot of it is just like, guys just need to be a bit more open with each other. We need to just drop this bravado that we come to group situations with and be vulnerable with each other. And suddenly you'll have an emotional intimacy with the people that you've known for 10, 15 years, but you've never been intimate with. And suddenly you've unlocked this richness and nourishment within our existing relationships. And I think we can do that. I think as guys, there's a lot of potential to do that with people that we've known for many, many years. But we've just never sort of fully unlocked and understood.
100%. I mean, me and Jacob, we're cousins, right? And we're cousins that were born a month apart. And, we knew each other for 18 years before we started this podcast. But the fact that, once or twice a week we sit and we talk for an hour or more about real emotional stuff. Of course, that's going to make, like, you one of my strongest friends, because that's how you build those friendships: vulnerability, openness. Anyway, Sam, thank you so much for giving us your time. We like the stuff you do. We like the way you think. We have a regular final question for every guest that comes on.
Nice.
And we just give them a moment to share something that they feel they need to share, express something they need to express, whether that's to me or Jacob or to anyone listening. And it gives you a moment to ponder on maybe something you've been thinking about, or something that you think's relevant, or some words of wisdom that you've got, just to close off this conversation today.
Yeah, I think I'll start with congratulating the both of you. I think you guys are doing really good stuff, and I've really enjoyed the last hour, 15 minutes. And I want to say, we spoke about, like, how we develop over our lifetimes as young men. I certainly weren't where you guys are at 21. I'm a little bit older than you guys, and I've lived a bit more life, and I've had a bit more time to come to where I am right now. But I want to congratulate you guys on what you're doing, and how far you've come in the 21 years of life you've had so far. The second thing I would touch on is what is on my mind a lot these days, and it's about mutual aid and how we as privileged people can help others in very direct and real ways that impact their lives. It's very good giving to charity, it's very good advocating and doing activism for political causes. But I think even beyond that, there's ways that we can help people outside of the context of economy and money. And that's what occupies my mind a lot. How can I use my labor to help other people with things that they need? And how can I organize with other people for masses of people to use their labor in ways that other people need? So I guess that's something that I want to sort of put out there, maybe encourage you guys to explore that in your own personal lives. And yeah, maybe there's a conversation that we can have going forward. We can circle back after you guys have had a think. Because I'm developing my own ideas. I want to kind of talk to as many people as possible about mutual aid, and the ways that we can help in our local regions, and with the people that we know. So that's just something I want to put out there. And I will be talking about it a lot more in the coming months and years as my ideas develop. But yeah, Kropotkin is a great starting point if you guys want to investigate. His book is literally called Mutual Aid, and it's an anarchist sort of Marxist worldview. And I would encourage you guys to read it if you've got time.
If people want to find out a bit more about you, where should they go?
They should go to Think Twice Show. So I probably should have introduced myself properly at the top, but so forgive me. My name's Tef, and I am one half of the Think Twice Show. You can find us on YouTube and all podcast platforms. On YouTube, I think we are Think Twice Show. On TikTok, we are Think Twice World. And on Instagram, we are Think Twice Show. So check us out, and if you like us, shout us. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And I really appreciated meeting and talking to you guys.
Amazing. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed this one.
Amazing.